You talked about the data set, and a couple of questions related to that. Is what is the best way to get that information? And maybe this is different for each municipality, and maybe there's a way to get it.
So do you folks have, like, most municipalities, years behind schedule, release motor vehicle collision data, and it does break down pedestrians, cyclists most of the time. Do you folks have that here?
I know there's that website that, I mean, it's not specific to London, but and I'm blanking on the name of it right now.
Bike Maps.
Bike Maps, that's the one. There's that, and I don't know beyond that if there is anything. Molly, do you happen to know off the top of your head? Yeah, I haven't come across anything like that. It's certainly very well hidden if we have anything like that.
And it's always delayed, and right now what we're, I was just doing some work on collisions in Waterloo in December, and I'm trying to make arguments about why these roundabouts they have are wild, but the data is dated to 2020, and so it's really backdated. But it did show that 70% of collisions involving vulnerable road users happened at these roundabouts. In Toronto, we have the police. We have a couple ways to look at it, but the police have a database. I don't know if you saw the shenanigans in High Park this summer where police were ticketing cyclists. So we went to their own database, and it shows where people are killed and seriously injured in motor vehicle collisions, and it breaks it down by pedestrian involvement or if a cyclist caused the crash. And it's 6 cyclists caused killed or seriously injured collisions in the same period that 17,000 motor vehicles did. And so we were able to make arguments and say, guys, why are you here when all around the perimeter of the park, motorists are knocking people down seriously in exponentially greater numbers. But as David said, Bike Maps, great tool. You can go on their site and check your intersection that you live by, and you can report yourself there as well. So I would honestly Google motor vehicle collision data London, see what pops up. Big city like this, sure they do it, yeah.
David, thank you for that presentation. I really liked how you sort of broke it down as a checklist. And I'm just wondering on your website, or if you've ever seen a checklist that you could kind of have handy, because you've got people that are definitely in shock. And it might be nice to just sort of, hey, I've got this checklist. Oh, there you go.
So thank you, Susan. I always do that in my presentation, but I didn't today. So we have these crash cards, and on the one side tells you what you need to write down, but more importantly, it links to an online report where you can enter those 4 critical things, and even take a picture of the dummy's license plate, and it will email you automatically. You can tick a box if you want us to get it as well, but most importantly, we want you to have that information, because it getting accident benefits, commencing a lawsuit, or if you witness another cyclist, they may be out of it. You wouldn't believe how many times we talk to folks who know about this, know what to take down, but in the shock and heat of the moment, got out of there without getting a license plate or a witness information. So if for you and for anybody you see go down, have this in your backpack, hopefully never use it.
Thank you.
Thanks. And there's a ton over there. Yeah.
The same things apply if you're in a collision.
What if you in a collision with a pedestrian, step out in front of you, and you don't have time to stop or whatever? How do you determine who's at fault, or what are your rights there?
Interesting. This comes up frequently in terms of questions. We don't see it all that often. David may have a better answer than me, but in any sort of situation where you harm somebody, you have a duty to stay there and exchange information. So although it's not a motor vehicle collision, you should provide information to that person and make sure that they get medical attention. The fault thing is difficult. We always say to be super mindful of pedestrians. On pass, always ring your bell. We got the waterfront trail in Toronto, and like I don't bike it in the summertime because people will walk out and be like taking a selfie right into the bike. And we've seen people go down that way, and fault in those situations is, it's tough. What do you suggest?
I mean, insurance is tricky then because it's not a motor vehicle accident. So if that's what you're asking, like you wouldn't have they wouldn't have access to the accident benefits system because there wasn't a motor vehicle involved. So then, if there's no ABs, then you're on the hook. Depending on whose fault it is, but then you can get into a tricky situation if you're the one, as the cyclist, who caused who hit a pedestrian. If they were at fault, we haven't done this, but we've been consulted about it. You could sue the person for your injuries if they were serious enough, but it only makes sense if they have home insurance. Okay. Because then you can access that policy, because you can't access an auto even if they have a car somewhere else. One thing that we're telling folks, if you can, and it's not at all equitable, and if like a car person tells me that all cyclists should have insurance, I'll deny it to the end. But you can get insurance, bicycle insurance that's sometimes worth it, either through Ontario Cycling Association or we have a friend, the bicycle broker. These things can help in certain situations. Yeah, you can get your own insurance, and if you own a house, you can get something called a personal liability umbrella policy, or a PLUP. Talk to your insurance broker about it. It's a little bit beyond my understanding, but that can kind of cover all of your liability, kind of no matter what you're doing, including if you're on your bike or doing anything else.
Who would you report that collision to? Would you have to report that to the police, or for your claim to stand up? If somebody stepped in front of you without warning, and they said it was your fault, it becomes debatable, right? Yeah, and I mean, you're both vulnerable road users, but the pedestrian would have the right of way in most situations. Yeah, if it's serious enough, you have to report it, I think. Especially if you're on an e-bike. How so? If you're on, I might have to double check this, but I think the legislation for the e-cargo bike pilot, that puts some extra reporting obligations, very similar to like the driver's reporting obligations. Interesting.
Just if I can give a personal anecdote on that, I was in a collision several years ago in Toronto. So I was cycling down Queen Street, parked cars on the one side, on the left, slow moving, high vehicles, pedestrian jaywalking appears in front of me, and I have no time to react. So I hit her. We both fell down. She stood up, brushed off. There was a cyclist behind me. We all stopped. Her friend stops. She looks, sees my front tire is all bent out of shape. She says, you know, it looks like you're going to have to fix that. She gives me a $20 bill and walks away. I'm shaken up. The cyclist behind me says $20 is not going to fix that. Turned out my frame was also bent, so I needed a new bike. The cyclist behind me was like, do you want me to go and try and get her information? He wasn't able to find her, and that was it. So, you know, it can happen, and it's, yeah.
Yeah, wow, I'm so sorry that happened. I can see it, exactly how it would happen in that place for sure. Step 2, gather information. She's handing you a 20, well, that's great and everything, but I'd like to see your identification just in case I'm injured later. Take a picture of her ID. If she's trying to leave, maybe start creating a stink. Get other people to get around and take pictures and say, this person injured me. They're not giving me their information. Can someone please help me? Yeah, this kind of stuff.
The tricky thing too is that I felt like I had the bicycle, she had nothing. So I was sore. I literally on the way down went, I'm sorry. It was not my fault. But, you know, she being more vulnerable, that I was thinking more about her than myself and having to buy a new bike. So that in my mind, being like, I want to make a stink was not the first thing. So, yeah, very tricky.
Totally. Yeah, and we have like all these like human reactions that happen, like I didn't want to be hurt, or I didn't want to create like people are embarrassed if they go down, you know, and did you get it? All the information? No, I was really embarrassed. I wanted to get out of there. You know, totally understandable.
Hey guys, so I ride with one of the local clubs here, London Cycling Club, and with that, occasionally we do get harassed by drivers. And we've had people either close pass, in some cases we're pretty sure deliberately they'll honk their horn, or in some cases even swerve toward us. We found it very challenging to either report this, even if we have video evidence sometimes of this happening. So wondering on your recommendations on how we can, both from a legal perspective, if we've got footage and license plates, how we can report to police, and perhaps also just your thoughts on general advocacy and for the public and getting support for getting these people off the road and so forth. We found it generally quite challenging in some cases to report these. Sometimes we're just blown off by police as well. So wondering on your thoughts there.
Boils my blood. This is like an ongoing battle. Many of us know that very well. Video recording is very good and super important to get information, but also catch the incident, because police will not believe us. We'll try to minimize. And even when you do report, they will not take the appropriate action. In January, a person reached out to me with video evidence of a driver squealing behind them and then running them off the road, though they didn't make contact. Similar. They fell and were concussed. And thankfully, witnesses got the plate of the person as they sped away, because it didn't catch on the video. Gave all that information to police. No, there wasn't an accident. We're only going to charge the person with a failure to give the lane. This is a criminal act. So there was video evidence, and they did make a highway traffic charge. Surprising, but that was not enough, especially given the nature of the injury. So we wrote a letter to the chief of police. First of all, I sent a couple emails to the officer and said, well, don't you think this? Just to get a nice little paper trail of them being an idiot. And then I enclosed that with my letter to the chief and said, and my local counselors as well, this is important, the local counselors, and said, this is wrong. A collision is not predicated on contact. There's an injury, and we are never going to stop road violence if you all keep not addressing it, or letting people get off scot-free or with a slap on the wrist for very serious things. And in that case, a detective who we'd worked with before was appointed, and ended up charging the driver with 3 counts of criminal, 3 criminal counts. Rare, because then like the next week I followed up on a case that we had video as well, no injury, but same thing, and the driver got out and like chased the guy to fight him, and they didn't do anything. We got a letter in the bank for that one. But it's very hit or miss, and as you know, mostly miss. On the egregious cases where you got good video evidence, you got a bunch of witnesses, get in writing why they're not going to do it. Like, always get emails from these guys. Always in writing. Don't talk to them on the phone about it. And then once you get that unsatisfactory response, then escalate it to your city councilor and the chief of police and say, and it's always, the line is that we're never, and in London it's easy. The person was killed on Upper Wentworth, right? In the last 6 months.
There was someone on Hamilton, and then there was, where was the other one?
It was out in the countryside a bit.
Oh, yeah.
The woman on Wellington?
I'm so sorry, it's escaping me.
There was somebody on Wellington South, between St. Thomas and here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
So reference these, and like when we had trouble in London in, was it December? And I just Googled hit and runs road violence in London, or you use the data if you find it. And then I pulled quickly from that data. Y'all had 9 hit and runs causing death or serious injury in 6 months, and put that in the letter too, and said none of this is going to be addressed if you keep, like there's cases of the drivers running off the road deliberately killing people here. None of this is going to change if you treat these incidents as nothing. Honestly, like if London's Cycling Link wants to be on, CC them on it, talk to them about advocacy approaches. Definitely you could CC us. We would happily amplify it for you. I'm sure David would love to hear about it too. Please, please, if you get video of this stuff and they give you an unsatisfactory response, reach out to us. We will help you hit them. It's critical. My dad was in Collingwood, was hit off the road by not someone purposely, but like a 90-year-old guy driving a 1970s like Buick, a boat, you know, and took him off the road, and he broke his ribs, and my uncle broke his collarbone. These kind of things need to be addressed. That person shouldn't have their license anymore. So we really, and after that I bought him a camera. So yeah, good you're cameraing it. Keep hitting them, pester them. These people care, the counselors care about what you all say. When they get messages from you, they care, and they'll talk to their staff about it. Like that, the one in London, like the officer said, is like, well, higher ups, after we sent the letter, it was like, yeah, the higher ups want me to take another look at it. So it works, it happens.
If you happen to be cycling in a different county, do you have anything specifically you'd address there?
How do you mean?
If you're with a club, but you're riding from county to county, it's a longer ride, and you're not in your own municipality when you get hit.
Copy them both.
Okay.
You're wherever you're a constituent and wherever you got hit, for sure. And all of the police departments that are involved. What do you think?
Yeah, and it might be the OPP, if you're kind of rurally. But yeah, I mean, a little shaming, like if it looks bad on one city council, if they're getting, CC'd on something that happened, it's their colleagues in another city who are hearing about something that happened in their municipality, and a little shame can go a long way.
Yeah. And with the police, like, they're constantly asking your counselor for more money. And so when you can point out that they're not doing their job, I have to believe that matters. That's our brand of advocacy. We hit a lot. Like, we're pretty vocal. There are other ways. Backdoor lobbying isn't what I'm not trying to say that in a disparaging way, but like some people have an in with counselors, and so there's a way to talk without like going on Twitter and berating them, and so the letter doesn't have to be a public thing. It can be a step in getting to some justice, and how you get there, whether it be private or public, is a decision to be based on the facts.
Yeah, leverage whatever you got. If you got connections, use them.
Hey, Dave. We're having a discussion right now about knowing your rights. Can we talk a little bit about the responsibilities that I need to be properly aware of? I know that sometimes, for example, things get confusing if I'm riding on the sidewalk, for example. Maybe some key reminders, and also for David, maybe some key reminders like, hey, if you don't want to get yourself in trouble, make sure that you are following these basic laws that maybe you're not fully aware of.
What's the sidewalk law in London?
Sidewalk, you can't ride on the sidewalk. You have to be under 14. It's either you have to be 14 and under, or under 14. I can't remember what the wording is now, in order to ride on the sidewalk.
Okay. See, that's one of the things I've heard conflicting accounts about what that is. For example, how do I get myself down Oxford Street?
I mean, I ride on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Especially if I have my kid in the bike with me, which there's no provision for that. There's no, like, if you've got a kid on a trailer, you're counted as whatever the age your kid is. If you have a kid in a trailer, you are still supposed to ride on the road. Yeah, I stay safe, and I will happily, take the ticket and fight it and make a stink about it if I ever got one. But, it's more important to stay safe than it is to, do that sort of thing, ride in an unsafe way.
If I may, from an advocacy perspective, there's lots of places in London. So I think of the collision on Sarnia in the past year with the bicycle and the bus, when the bus driver opened the door and said, "Why weren't you on the sidewalk?" So I would say definitely when you don't feel safe, ride on the sidewalk. And if there's charges to the cyclist, we'll take that up. And somebody like David is going to make a case out of that. And I don't think, when it's very clear that the road is not a safe place to be, maybe that's when a law, a legal case gets the ball rolling.
Yeah, in that sort of situation with where there's a collision and someone, maybe wasn't following the letter of the law in a collision, that's something that you can kind of deal with. But in terms of, if you're just get a ticket or something like that, that becomes a criminal or quasi-criminal matter that you need a criminal defense lawyer or someone who does that sort of work to fight the ticket.
Yeah, it's like, of course you would, Roger, like that, where it's dangerous to ride on the road, like take the sidewalk for sure. And David kind of touched on it. If you, tickets aside, if you came off the sidewalk and got hit in a crosswalk, it doesn't mean, just because it's illegal to bike there, does not mean that you do not have a case and that you cannot seek compensation. You may have contributed to the harm, something we call contributory negligence, and so any compensation you get will be reduced by a percentage of your fault. But still talk to somebody and get legal advice, because sort of the bellwether case is in Aurelia, a cop driving at night hit a cyclist in the crosswalk, cycling, and that cyclist was all in dark clothing, didn't have any lights, and was intoxicated. He may not even been wearing a helmet too, I can't remember. And that was a 50-50 split. So that cyclist didn't get nothing, they just had it reduced. So ride safe and don't think that because you're doing something, even though the law, which was designed for motor vehicles, says one thing, and you were doing something else, that it totally disentitles you from support.
Hi, thanks. This has been great. Helmets. Question about helmets. If we're not, because that's the thing the media always talks about, that's what drivers always focus on, were you wearing a helmet? Is there any kind of legal implication, if we weren't wearing a helmet, whatever, I don't have specifics in this example, but let's say the driver was at fault, or whoever was at fault, is there any sort of liability to us if we weren't wearing a helmet? How does that play in?
It's what I was just talking about, contributory negligence. If you don't have to, it's not the law. And we all know from data and science that certain collisions with motor vehicles, a helmet will not protect you. These are not designed to withstand a blow from this is not what they're designed for. It will be up to the defendant driver's lawyer to prove that, okay, first of all, you would have had to suffer a head injury, and that's what you're claiming for. And then they will have to lead evidence that if you weren't wearing a helmet, then a helmet would have saved or mitigated the injury to your head. And then you'll get a reduction as well. We've got a crosswalk claim right now where we're gonna lose points on the crosswalk for sure. But my client wasn't wearing a helmet and suffered a head injury, but took the injury was in the front of the face. So my expert will say that a helmet wouldn't have prevented this. So it's irrelevant. And that's going to be our line, for sure. Yeah, great question.
You touched on it briefly about the inequalities of this, and we've talked about having, a camera on you and all of these other things. Like, what would you say to someone who doesn't have those things on them at the time? And is there any push to have some equitability when you're doing your advocacy for bicyclists?
Sorry, can you rephrase that one a bit?
You've said, make sure, it's good if you have this video, it's good to take a picture of the person's license. Is there some advocacy being done for people who might not have those things on them, or what would you suggest? And how much do you think that affects their ability to make a claim?
Yeah, inequities in our society translate to the justice system too. So not having access to a $400 GoPro, if that GoPro caught the collision versus not having one, will play out like how you think it will. But it doesn't just because you don't have it doesn't mean that you won't get justice or some semblance of it. I rode with a camera when I commuted a far distance for a while, for probably a year, and then I was like, this sucks. Downloading the footage every time, or the battery was shit, and then so now I only use it on really gnarly snowstorm days when I know drivers are focused on snow and probably the donut they're eating, and not me. And so most of the time I don't have a camera and shenanigans happens. And sometimes you can't get your phone out, right? I report a lot of dangerous drivers. What I do is I avoid escalating because I've seen vehicles weaponized. Something happens that was gnarly. I look at the license plate and I say it over and over and over and over and over in my mind, and I pull over and I get on the side or off the road, and then I text myself that license plate, and then I report it. So even if you don't have a video, and someone harms you, there's
you do what you can. You can write something down. If you keep a journal, write all that information down, or send it in an email or text it to yourself. So there's a time stamped at this, you say the accident happened at this time with this license plate and the color, it was a red car, and you have that in an email to yourself on that day. That's helpful. I don't ride with a camera either. Those sorts of things are helpful, but they won't. In most cases, it's not. If you don't have video footage of the accident or the collision, it's not going to be the end of the story, just because there's no video of it happening.
You think the driver has a phone also to take the pictures?
And witnesses too, just general bystanders. We have cases where that's really helpful. That person totally did that on purpose. And they would say that, write that down right away quick. And we know in some cases, we've got video that shows the gnarliness and the deliberate act of the motorist to cause us harm, and they don't do anything with it. So,
Yeah, and I just was wondering, how often do you see severe impacts on that driver being able to drive again? So have you seen them have driver suspensions, or do you find that it's, sorry?
I've in the really unfortunate case out in Tilsonburg, it's in the paper, so it's public. We have an Army vet who was killed by someone high and drunk. And in that case, that person lost their license and got jail time. This is not the norm. This is rare. And they only threw that charge at that person because they're part of a vulnerable group that they don't care about. So they targeted this person with addiction issues and gave them the stiffest sentence that they would never give, the owner of Loblaws if they did the same thing, Which is a piece of advocacy at the provincial level that y'all can do is write to your MPP and say, we want passage of, I think it's called it now, the Moving Ontarians Safely Act, because that's how conservatives speak. But it was the Protecting Vulnerable Road Users Act. And this creates real penalties, including loss of license and retraining and all sorts of stuff, if you harm somebody in your motor vehicle and cause them injury. Really important. Protecting Vulnerable Road Users Act, your local MPP, we want this thing. The NDP has been trying to do it for about 5 years now. It's getting closer. But you know, I've got these tickets in Hyde Park, cyclists speeding in a effing park, and they're $120. And I got a client in Guelph where a driver cut across 4 lanes of traffic and 2 bike lanes and clipped him to get some nuggets, half hip replacement, improper lane change, $110 ticket.
Oh my God.
He probably got it. They wouldn't tell me, but he probably got it reduced or tossed. So the penalties out there right now are atrocious.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Love cycling though. I hate to be a downer. I'm so sorry. So good.
That's the problem with this.
I was just wondering, are we legally required to use the bike lane if it's there? Like if it's covered in snow or sand or pedestrians or what have you?
Great question. What do you say?
If you are riding an e-cargo bike, yes, you have to use the bike lane, e-cargo bike, and those are defined very specifically in the regulations, and they say you have to use a bike lane where one's available. Weirdly, the legislation does not make any, does not give you any leeway if you want to, for instance, make a left turn and you need to not be in the bike lane to make the left turn. The way it's written, you just have to stay in the bike lane and then turn across however many lanes of traffic, because no one really thought it through. Yeah. Aside from that, I mean, you have to stay, as a slow-moving vehicle, which a bike is, you have to stay, as a general rule, in the right lane or as far right as is practicable, which means safe, basically. Typically, that would mean in a bike lane, and if a bike lane is not safe to be in, then you can't really be in it.
That would be my thing as well. The e-cargo bike, that's super interesting. I didn't know that.
It's a weird piece of legislation. There are so many things wrong with that regulation, but
for your standard cycle, yeah, if you can't be in the bike lane or you're going to injure yourself being in there because it's not maintained or there's a huge pothole or something, yeah, you have to safely take the lane for as long as you need to, and then that's fine. You will probably get blowback from some drivers. But just stay calm and stay safe, Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question around, because as you mentioned, the law was written for cars as vehicles, and then you're talking about speeding tickets for cyclists in High Park, for example. As a cyclist, if a cyclist was found to be speeding, for example, in Hyde Park or wherever else, is there precedent for that to affect their driver's license if they have one? Because I've heard rumors that you can get points for things that you did outside of a car. Like if I was found to, I don't know, any kind of thing like that. Does it transfer?
Great question. So on our social media, we have a cyclist guide to police interactions. Never show them your identification. You do not have to, as a cyclist, show ID. You have to truthfully state your name and address, truthfully. When you show your ID, I have more times than not seen the ticket result in demerit points. Shouldn't be the case, and maybe you'd get that tossed, or you could fight it, but that's tons of court work, and not many lawyers are gonna do that. You wouldn't wanna spend the money for it. Never give your driver's license. If they ask you for it, I don't have it on me. My name is Tamara, and my address is 123 True Street, whatever it is. Yeah, great question. I have heard even in odd cases that even by just giving your information, they've somehow pulled up your driver's license and hit you with demerit points. I don't know if that's just a myth or whatnot, but safe to say, don't give your ID.
I highly recommend reading that blog. I mean, read all of the blogs on his website. They're all excellent, but the guide to police interactions is particularly good.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's in a series of slides right now. Before this summer, when they inevitably descend on us again, we'll make it a blog or something like that. But yeah, it's the Highway Traffic Act is so bizarre, and it was written however long ago, and do you know that in addition to a light, you have to have these on the front of your bike? in this size. I got them like made up kind of as a joke, and I couldn't, when they came, I was like, wow, that is never gonna fit around my front fork. So it's like such an outdated tool, and yeah.
I have a follow-up question about riding on the right side. So anything about turning lanes, and the cyclist would be allowed to be one lane over, or if there is a King Street, for example, you have the dedicated bus lane. So technically, the cyclist is supposed to be in kind of the middle lane there. Any legal implications if a collision happens in situations like that?
I don't know about your dedicated bus lanes, but usually our dedicated bus lanes are cyclist permitted.
As far as I know, I'm just gonna have to, I think we're allowed to use them here. I don't want to nail myself down to saying the wrong thing, so I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not gonna,
once I worked downtown and I saw a bunch when King Road, when they took off the bike lane, I saw 5 officers standing, and I went to them and I said, what do I have to do if I go on King because you took off the bike lane? And the other day I was cycling on the left side to go into the parking of the covered market, and a car, entitled prick, stopped in the middle of the road and started yelling at me. And then I just, looked at him and kept going, and he moved again and stopped and started yelling at me until I got into the parking. So I was thinking, well, if I'm turning left, it doesn't make any sense to be on the right. And then it says dedicated bus lane. Am I supposed to be on it, or am I supposed to be in the middle of the road? Because that's, so they didn't know. They said, I don't know.
I think it's whatever is safe for you to do. And like some people feel safe crossing to that left turning lane and making a left. If it's not safe for you, then cross at the crosswalk. And I would get off my bike and walk it across. But like, just do whatever's safe for you.
Just a quick follow-up comment for y'all. It says here that the only exception, it says here that other motor vehicles are not permitted to park, stop, or drive in this lane.
So bikes
it might be, if you're a motor vehicle, no, don't be traveling on the bus dedicated lane, but perhaps there is an exception for cyclists, or maybe pedal bikes as opposed to e-bikes.
So
we could look further into it, of course.
Yeah. E-bikes are generally considered power-assisted bikes, which can be separate from, but they're normally, I think they're considered motor vehicles under the Highway Traffic Act in most cases, I think. Pretty sure.
It's like those super long definition with lots of things in it. I'm trying to picture it in my mind. We're not though, like on motor, we're considered vehicles, but we're not considered motor vehicles.
Yeah. Just as long as there's not some bylaw that's defining something differently.
Always check your, that should be written somewhere about the bus lanes, and if it isn't, great way to establish a rapport with your local counselor. Okay, what am I supposed to do here? I don't want to die. Maybe don't say it like that, but.
Kind of jumping off that, came up in a meeting of ours recently that the laws about drinking and cycling are different for e-bikes versus conventional bikes. And I'm wondering if you could mention that, because I think it was useful, and if there's any other laws that work differently for e-bikes and regular bikes.
I don't know the answer to the drinking one, actually.
Okay, so it's in the criminal code. The provisions about drinking and driving apply to e-bikes. So you can be charged criminally for drinking and driving if you're on an e-bike, but it doesn't include regular bicycles. So you can catch a DUI basically if you're drinking while riding an e-bike.
You're not just talking about cargo e-bikes.
That's correct. Any bike that's powered in any way other than by pedaling.
Someone should tell that to the e-bike rental companies in Niagara. Yikes.
If you got a business, still better than driving.
Hey guys, question about organizing cycling activities and waivers. It's a common practice. I've seen pretty much anything I've had to sign up for requires me to sign some kind of a waiver. If I want to organize my own stuff, one, is it even worth doing a waiver? Does it actually do anything? And two, what should I include?
Waivers can be useful. A well-drafted waiver can be useful. This is going to be a bit of a lawyer answer, but I would say don't try and draft it yourself. If you are organizing an event and you are concerned about liability, your insurance is probably going to insist on one. They might have, if you're getting insurance for the event anyway, your insurer might be able to provide you with something. The Canadian Cycling Association or the Ontario Cycling Association has, I think, a standard waiver that they use for their events. But waivers are, like the law of waivers is pretty complicated. So a well-drafted waiver that complies with all the case law and everything should protect you as an organizer to some extent, probably in most situations, which is about the most lawyer answer I could possibly give.
Someone like David or myself may sue you anyways.
Yeah, oh, for sure. You're still going to get sued. You just might win at the end of it.
Yeah, I think this comes up all the time, and our friends at Cycle Hamilton are having a heck of a time right now trying to organize a ride for the Ontario Bike Summit, and then all these things come up with our Ghost Bike Memorial rides, which we're planning one in Oakville on Sunday next week, and protests too. And it's part of our community activism and mobilization should be spared from this insurance stuff. But whether you're doing a protest ride or a group ride, take steps to mitigate your risk. Tell people at the beginning of the ride or in the group chat or whatever, please abide, this ride will be done according to the rules of the road. We'll be stopping at all stop signs and all red lights and indicating all turns. You understand you're coming out on this ride at your own risk. And please cycle according to the rules of the road and be safe. And then if you have people who are experienced ride leaders leading it, that can help you. Don't take people down the opposite way on one ways or encourage dangerous things. Do things to mitigate so that someone like David or myself doesn't send you a letter. I don't know that answer. A waiver is probably good if you can get one, but if it's something more informal, that's not really possible, then just mitigate your risk as much as possible. We did our High Park protest ride. My business partner was having a conniption because how are you? And I was just we have to do this, but there's risks.
Just in that same mitigation, because we always hear they were in black. I couldn't see them, although you obviously saw them because you said they were in black. Is there anything any legal standing of what you have to wear to be cycling? Not
wearing. And I cycle in all black. That's the color of my winter jacket, and I like that color. But I have a powerful 800 lumen light that is banging all times a day. But if you're cycling at night, having a light on and reflectors is a pretty good way for someone like David and I to protect those kind of arguments. We don't really listen when the insurance company's well, they were wearing all black, and I'm but they had a bike light, so I'm not gonna entertain much discussion about that usually.
Okay, and to follow up, because you mentioned your flashing light, and I've heard from different cyclists because that the pulsating lights aren't the best because they can affect drivers' vision and distancing, and I think a little bit about that flashing light could affect someone who has epilepsy. So which is the better light?
I don't know, but this is something that I've chatted with Ontario Cycling recently, and they're really keen on the pulsating ones. But those aren't legally, it's not going to make a difference. Right. You got a light, the light's on.
I mean, maybe you have. I've certainly never heard someone say, "Well, your light was on steady; it wasn't flashing." So, I wouldn't entertain that either. So, legally, I don't think. Scientifically, I don't know. I've kind of heard both things as well. So I don't really know.
The epilepsy thing is like, that's a fair comment and something that like we should all look into more. But I don't know. I bang my light.
Is there a brightness requirement too for those lights, like for at night?
I don't think so.
Here again, I'm thinking back and trying to remember the wording. I think it has to be visible from a certain distance, or maybe that's the low light visibility that I'm thinking, because you have to have the light on at night or any time when the visibility is below a certain amount. But yeah, I don't think there's.
And I mean, because that would really like create hurdles for people, you know, like that, like 800 lumen light, like that's not cheap, you know, and.
Thanks, Dave. I just had a question about something you said back. So you said that when you see something that's dangerous, you kind of keep the license plate in into your head and then you put it down. When you say you report it, do you call 911 to report it, or do you call the offline? I'm just curious, like, I mean, I hate to sort of tie up the 911 line, so I'm just wondering how you deal with that.
Great question. I have a blog on this, reporting dangerous drivers. And yeah, it's like every municipality, not every, lots of municipalities have their own reporting mechanism. I think I've listed London's in the article, but I'm sure there's one down here. It's either you either get an online report or there's like a non-emergency number you can call. In Toronto, we have a core report, citizen online reporting something, and you can upload photos and videos and all that stuff.
If someone's driving erratically and you think they might be drunk, then call 911 and try and get them off the road. But if it's just someone kind of they swerved or they close past you or something like that, then that's probably you probably don't want to tie up 911, especially. I mean, you get if you're calling 911 every other day because you're getting close past, they're going to get kind of mad at you. But
to follow up with that, I cycle very early in the morning going to work, and I often see a lot of like theft. You can see that the bikes are being taken apart on a corner, or I can see them riding along with two. And I do feel vulnerable at that time of morning. I do try to be very creative how I get to work. But I'm wondering about that. Like, I never know what to do, and I feel bad, but I know if I pull over, I'm the only person on the road, so I feel compelled to keep going. But I have seen a lot of stuff at 5:45 in the morning, that sort of thing. Any thoughts on that, who I would call? Or
no one likes bikes being stolen, but I can understand why they are, and like that's something that needs to be addressed in a big way. It's unlikely if you reported bike theft that anything would happen, so I probably wouldn't sick the police on an already vulnerable population. I don't have a good answer for it. My personal thing is I don't engage. I have helped people get bikes back in a non-police way, but it's not something that I look at too much. If I'm going to report everything, because we could you have full-time job reporting, probably on your way here, whoever biked here probably could have reported something. So I just it's like a gut check, like, wow, that was really bad and that upset me, or like that person's so dangerous they didn't hit me, but they're gonna definitely hit someone later. And so I report on like a sliding scale,
Hi, my name is Joy, and then I'm a newcomer here. I'm an international student here, and then I just want to know, is it written in the law that we need to stop at every crosswalk to actually cross the street?
Great question. It's kind of confusing because that's what the law is. The Highway Traffic Act says that you cannot bicycle through a crosswalk, but you can cycle parallel to it, just not within those little lines.
But I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, is there one? There's not one right here. Oh yeah, right there.
I mean, I can see the lines, but I wouldn't know it's the law. Like.
Yeah, it is the law. Yeah, we wrote an article on that. So it was a lame article. Sorry. But yeah, it's it is the law, and really a good way to do it is like Ontario has a cyclist guide, like a rules of the road guide. It's actually okay. I don't know if London has a cycling rules of the road guide. Toronto has one that's great.
The Middlesex London Health Unit has one, actually.
Oh, perfect.
There you go.
Well, you got a taker right there.
Oh my gosh, I hate rating.
This is hopefully it's mostly image based. Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, I think this is more on the advocacy part of things, because when I wanted to start cycling, I actually, it was the Wortley Village, the gathering on the green when I stumbled into London Cycle Link. And then I took that manual, and because I'm a nerd, so I had to, before I do anything, even if I buy a little piece of, like a coffee maker, I always read manuals. So I read that, and I realized, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, and went to bought the bicycle. The first couple of months, there was joy in the first couple of weeks of cycling, or going back to cycling. And then I became very angry. So I could relate to the part when he said I became always angry at intersections. And I was like that person I told you about. I let him go, but another time I actually stopped my bike and I was ready to go Arab on him. And I grew up in that part of the world where the lack of law, or there is law, but it's just it's cosmetic. So it's your tribe, your status, all of that. So you have to protect your own self. So I'm used to walking on the sidewalk and being very aggressive, very protective. Even the look that I wear on my face is supposed to be that, so you don't mess with me. And it took me decades to get rid of this and become relaxed. And even before I came to Canada, I got rid of that. So I was so angry at myself as well that I'm going back to that person. And it wasn't until a colleague of mine at work, who's an amazing person, an advocate, he himself is a person with disability. He told me many times how in the morning when he's walking his dog on his mobility scooter, when he's crossing, cars cross in front of him and behind him when it's his turn to cross the road. So he has the light turned for him, so they don't care. So an amazing person, but then I saw him pass by me and he didn't leave enough distance. And I realized that, well, okay, you know what? A lot of people maybe don't know, motorists, maybe don't know how to deal with cyclists. And because of how I think London is seeing a growth in cyclist numbers, I think from the advocacy point of view, is there something that we can do, maybe the councillors, maybe MPPs, or request some sort of, just like we have this manual, maybe even campaigns on radios or TV that tells motorists what to do. This is how you're supposed to deal when there's a cyclist, there's cyclists on the road, and what are your responsibilities as well as your rights as motorists? Because I realized that not everybody is not happy with me sharing the road with them. That was the turning point. That was when I started getting a bit relaxed, and I'm no longer angry.
So it's like raises a great point, and like I think that we are only going to have safe streets if like a ton of things happen. The law change that we talked about earlier, the protecting vulnerable road users and stiffer penalties, more separated and safe infrastructure, and attitude changes from people behind the wheel. People have to see driving as not their right, but a privilege that you can lose. And a big part of the attitude change is exactly what you're talking about. Our governments need to invest in public education campaigns, robust driver training that explains what vulnerable road users are and how to drive around them. We need the whole thing needs to be turned on its head. Like we have a driver-focused culture, and that simply will not do anymore. But you can understand why people are frustrated and confused, because like I bet you they put these bike lanes in here and didn't explain anything to anybody, and we got bike lanes all over the city of Toronto. and every intersection looks different. And I'm like, of course that driver's confused, because that's different than what was there on the next block. And like, how are these people supposed to understand? Like, they're up against it as well. So yeah, totally. It has to be, we have to be fighting on all levels. Safe infrastructure, enforcement, non-police enforcement, that and deterring laws, and attitude changes and driver retraining, for sure. All of that stuff. Can't have one without the other. We'll never be safe.
Just ban cars.
As I get into my car and drive home, no, and like, but like, you know, I and I'm sure David agrees, and Molly and the team here too. Like, we all do this advocacy work, and you all cycle and you advocate in your own ways, because like, A, we love it, and B, we know that we can win. You know, we can and we will, and that's like why it's so great to like come here and hear from you all, because then I can see what's going on across the province and how we're all up against similar things and how we're dealing with it, like I said at the beginning. And it's like really heartwarming to know that we have, you know, in each community across the province, like folks who are in it to win, you know, and I know we'll be successful, you know, with groups like yours all across the province.
This is a quick follow-up, and I guess the question wouldn't be for you, but I've never gotten my driver's license. I'm curious to know if anybody who did acquire their driver's license in the last maybe like 5 years, what do they teach drivers about how to handle cyclists on the road, at least here in Ontario?
I mean, I don't remember everything, but I remember that when you're at the first stage, which is like memorization of a bunch of stuff from the book, it's like, how many meters is supposed to leave behind a school bus? Not enough. It's supposed to be like 8 or 10 or something. Once you become an actual driver, you leave enough meters between you and the school bus. I remember there was some mention of cycling, like in like the booklet that you're memorizing, and then taking like the multiple choice test or whatever it was back then. But then that kind of just disappears, at least in my experience. Like if you're in the car with a driving instructor and there's a cyclist, I'm sure they would tell you to pass, like, and give them a meter or whatever it is legally. But from then on, I don't think there's as much specific, like if you're in a city that has bike lanes or bike infrastructure, then I guess you'd get that instruction from your driving instructor. But really, I think the main focus is in the written memorization cramming phase, which is why nobody knows what the left turn means if you don't the right turn with your left arm. Like, I have mixed feelings about whether I should just point with my right arm instead of signaling like as if I was out the driver's side door. But yeah, I would, it's not that much after the beginning section.
I did my G1 recently, and one of the specific questions on the test was how much space you're supposed to give a cyclist. So it is taught, and I did like an in-person class, and I do remember them saying like old people find driving with cyclists a lot harder because there just weren't bike lanes and there was nothing to deal with then. But I don't remember anything beyond that.
All right, well, yeah, on that cheery note, thank you again for coming. Thank you for all the wisdom you've imparted today, and let's have another big round of applause.